Thaddeus Blackwood stared at the amber liquid in his crystal tumbler, swirling it absently as he stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Beacon Hill mansion. Boston's skyline glittered against the night, but the sight had long ceased to move him. The gun rested heavily in the drawer of his mahogany desk behind him. He'd been contemplating it more frequently these days. "Mr. Blackwood, you haven't eaten anything today." Wyatt Caldwell's voice broke through the silence. His personal assistant of 12 years had grown accustomed to these moments, watching his employer drift further into the abyss each passing day. "I'm not hungry." Thaddeus didn't turn around. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days since the plane crash. The pain hadn't dulled. It had merely changed form, becoming a constant companion rather than an acute agony. Wyatt placed a folder on the desk. "The quarterly reports require your signature, and the Whistler Environmental Gala is tomorrow night. Blackwood Technologies is receiving an award for the solar initiative. Send someone else. With respect, sir, the board has concerns. Your continued absence is affecting stock prices. Mr. Vandermeer specifically requested your presence." At the mention of Elliot Vandermeer, Thaddeus's jaw tightened. His former partner and now chief operations officer had been making moves in the boardroom. Subtle, but noticeable to anyone paying attention. "Fine." Thaddeus drained his whiskey in one swallow. 2 hours, maximum. Dr. Graves called again. "She'd like to move your session to." "Cancel it." Thaddeus finally turned, his tall frame silhouetted against the city lights. At 38, grief had etched permanent lines into his once handsome face. His dark hair was threaded with silver at the temples, and his blue eyes had turned cold as winter frost. "Therapy is pointless." Wyatt hesitated before speaking again. "Today is Ethan's birthday." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Ethan would have been 9. Thaddeus closed his eyes, seeing his son's face, Caroline's laugh, before the images were replaced by twisted metal and flames. "Get out." Wyatt nodded and retreated silently. When the door closed, Thaddeus moved to his desk and opened the drawer. The gun was still there, alongside a framed photo he couldn't bring himself to look at anymore. He slammed the drawer shut and poured another drink. His phone vibrated. A text from Dr. Lucinda Graves. "Avoidance doesn't heal trauma, Thaddeus. The mind is like a wound. Without proper care, it festers." He deleted the message without responding. What did she know about wounds that wouldn't heal? About waking up each morning with the crushing realization that the people who made life worth living were gone forever? His $10 billion fortune meant nothing. His company's innovations that changed the world meant nothing. The endless charity donations in Caroline's and Ethan's names meant nothing. The intercom buzzed. Wyatt again. "Sir, Ms. Simmons from PR needs final approval on your speech for tomorrow." "I'm not giving a speech." "Sir, the board. Tell Eleanor to write something brief." 3 minutes. Gratitude for the recognition, commitment to continued environmental initiatives, the usual platitudes. Thaddeus moved to the far wall, pressing a concealed button that revealed his private elevator. He descended to the basement level, which housed his rarely used home gym and the garage containing his collection of vintage cars. The sleek black Aston Martin had been Caroline's favorite. He ran his fingers along its hood, remembering how she would laugh when they took weekend drives along the coast. His phone rang. Elliot Vandermeer. Thaddeus declined the call. Instead, he opened his laptop and connected to the company's servers. Blackwood Technologies had revolutionized solar energy storage 5 years ago, making Thaddeus one of the youngest tech billionaires in America. Now he barely participated in daily operations, signing documents and approving decisions from the isolation of his home. A new email arrived from Wyatt with the gala details. The Whistler Foundation was recognizing Blackwood Technologies for developing a biodegradable solar panel that was being implemented in conservation efforts worldwide. The irony wasn't lost on Thaddeus. He was being celebrated for protecting the future of a world he no longer wanted to be part of. He closed the laptop and returned to the main floor, wandering the empty hallways of the mansion he'd bought for a family that no longer existed. 19 rooms for one man. Absurd. In Caroline's studio, untouched since her death, canvases covered in vibrant colors captured landscapes from their travels. She'd been painting Peru when they left for their anniversary trip. Ethan had stayed with Caroline's parents. The plane was supposed to bring them home after 10 days in the Mediterranean. Instead, it plunged into the ocean with 27 souls aboard. 27 lives cut short due to what the official report called mechanical failure. The doorbell rang, an unusual occurrence at this hour. Through the security monitor, Thaddeus saw a delivery person holding a package. He ignored it. Probably another sympathy gift from someone who thought material items could fill the void of loss. His phone buzzed with another text, this time from Eleanor Simmons, speech draft attached. Please review before tomorrow. Thaddeus closed his eyes, feeling the familiar weight of exhaustion settling over him. Tomorrow he would put on his custom-tailored suit, affix a practiced smile, and play the role of the brilliant, philanthropic tech mogul. He would accept the award, shake hands, and make appropriate small talk. And then he would return to this mausoleum of memories, to the drawer with the gun, and continue contemplating whether tonight would finally be the night he found the courage to use it. The truth was, Thaddeus Blackwood had died 3 years ago alongside his wife and son. His body simply hadn't caught up to the reality yet. Meridian Winslow fumbled with her pill case, her fingers trembling slightly as she extracted the small blue tablet. 6 years of taking the medication had never made the daily ritual easier. She swallowed it with a gulp of water and tucked the case back into her purse. Everything okay? Priscilla Montgomery looked up from her microscope, eyebrows raised in concern. Just fine, Meridian replied, smoothing down her simple cotton dress. The cardiologist adjusted my dosage last month. Still getting used to it. The Harvard Ethnobotany Laboratory hummed with activity around them. Meridian had only been in Boston for 3 weeks, but already the pristine white counters and gleaming equipment felt more like home than her family's austere farmhouse in Vermont ever had. You should have mentioned your condition during the interview, Priscilla said, pushing her tortoiseshell glasses up her nose. We could have arranged accommodations. Meridian shook her head, auburn curls bouncing around her heart-shaped face. I don't need special treatment. The Winslow family doesn't accept handouts. The words echoed her father's stern voice. Priscilla rolled her eyes. It's not a handout, it's workplace equity. Anyway, have you finished the analysis of those Amazonian samples? Meridian slid a folder across the counter. 3 potential compounds with anti-inflammatory properties. One shows preliminary promise for arrhythmia treatments. Priscilla whistled. Impressive for your first month. Plants have always spoken to me. Meridian ran her fingers along the leaves of a small potted specimen on her workstation. They're honest in ways people rarely are. Speaking of people, Priscilla said, pulling up an invitation on her tablet, the Whistler Environmental Gala is tonight, and I've got an extra ticket with your name on it. A gala? I don't think every major environmental foundation and green tech company in New England will be there. You want funding for your preservation project, right? This is how you get it. Meridian bit her lip. The idea of schmoozing with Boston's elite made her stomach churn, but her research needed backing. The rapid deforestation of regions containing rare medicinal plants couldn't wait for her social anxiety to subside. Will I need to, dress up? She glanced down at her practical clothing. Priscilla's laughter echoed through the lab. Yes, Cinderella, you'll need a gown. Luckily, we were the same size. Come by my place at 6. Hours later, Meridian barely recognized herself in Priscilla's full-length mirror. The emerald silk dress hugged her slender frame, making her green eyes appear almost luminous against her pale skin. You clean up nicely, country mouse, Priscilla said, applying a final coat of mascara to Meridian's lashes. Ready to dazzle some millionaires? The Whistler mansion sprawled across 5 acres in Brookline, its Georgian architecture illuminated by tasteful spotlights. Luxury cars lined the circular drive as attendees in formal wear ascended the marble stairs. Meridian clutched her borrowed clutch purse, feeling the reassuring shape of her medication inside. Remember, Priscilla whispered as they entered the grand foyer. Elevator pitch ready. You've got about 30 seconds to make an impression before their attention spans evaporate. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and wealth. Waiters circulated with champagne flutes and delicate hors d'oeuvres. Meridian accepted a glass but didn't drink, alcohol being strictly forbidden with her medication. Blackwood Technologies is getting the Innovation Award tonight, Priscilla said, nodding toward a cluster of executives. Their CEO is rarely seen in public these days. Tragic story, lost his family in an accident a few years back. Which one is he? Meridian scanned the group. That's the thing, he's not here. Word is, he might not show. Shame. Their solar panels are revolutionary, and they've pledged millions toward conservation. As the evening progressed, Meridian found herself cornered by a silver-haired venture capitalist who seemed more interested in her neckline than her research. Excusing herself, she escaped through French doors leading to the mansion's gardens. The cool night air soothed her flushed cheeks as she wandered deeper into the manicured landscape. The garden was a showcase of horticultural perfection, too perfect for Meridian's taste. She preferred plants in their wild state, untamed and honest. Still, she couldn't help admiring a rare species of orchid nestled among more common blooms. They flew that in from Malaysia yesterday, a deep voice said from the shadows. $12,000 for a flower that will die in a week. Meridian startled, turning toward the voice. A tall figure stood partially concealed by an ancient oak tree. She could make out broad shoulders in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, but his face remained in darkness. Seems wasteful, she replied, her heart rate quickening slightly. She pressed a hand to her chest, a habitual gesture whenever she felt her pulse change rhythm. Most things are. The man stepped forward, and moonlight revealed a face carved from sorrow. Despite his immaculate appearance, his eyes were empty, as if looking through her rather than at her. You don't seem to be enjoying the party, Meridian said, noticing a half-empty whiskey glass in his hand. I'm not. His bluntness was refreshing after hours of polite pretense inside. Are you? Not particularly. I'm here to find funding for my research, but I'm terrible at networking. What research? Ethnobotany, specifically the preservation of endangered medicinal plants. Indigenous communities have used them for centuries, but we're losing species faster than we can document their properties. Something flickered briefly in the man's empty eyes. Interest, perhaps. You're passionate about this. I believe plants can heal more than we realize, Meridian said, but only if we protect them. He nodded slightly, then gestured toward a freshly disturbed patch of soil near the oak's massive roots. They're renovating this section tomorrow, removing this tree to extend the patio. That's criminal, Meridian said without thinking. This oak is at least 200 years old. The ghost of a smile crossed his face. Perhaps you should tell that to our host. Perhaps I will. She extended her hand. I'm Meridian Winslow. He hesitated before taking it. His palm was warm against her perpetually cool skin. Thaddeus. Before she could respond, a man in a sleek gray suit approached rapidly from the house. There you are, Mr. Blackwood. They're about to present the award. Everyone's waiting. Meridian's eyes widened in recognition. You're Thaddeus Blackwood? The emptiness returned to his expression. Unfortunately. He turned to leave, then paused. Good luck with your plants, Ms. Winslow. Some things are worth saving. His gaze drifted momentarily to the ancient oak before he walked away. Meridian watched him go, a strange mixture of emotions swirling in her chest. She knelt beside the disturbed earth near the tree, running her fingers through the soil. Something had been buried or unearthed here recently. Her medication alarm chimed softly from her purse. As she took her evening pill, she caught sight of Thaddeus Blackwood on the stage through the ballroom windows. Even from a distance, the contrast was striking, a man surrounded by adulation and achievement, yet utterly alone. He reminded her of specimens she'd studied in the lab, perfectly preserved on the outside, but no longer living. Later that night, as Priscilla drove them home, her friend couldn't stop talking about the connections she'd made. Meridian remained quiet, her thoughts returning to the garden and the man with the empty eyes who'd noticed an orchid's value and an oak's impending doom. Earth to Meridian. Priscilla waved a hand in front of her face. Did you hear anything I said? Sorry, just tired. Meridian glanced out the window at the passing city lights. Do you know anything more about Blackwood Technologies? Why? Oh my God, did you meet Thaddeus Blackwood? Priscilla nearly swerved into the next lane. He never attends these things anymore. Just briefly. In the garden. What was he like? Meridian considered the question carefully. Broken, she finally said. Like something valuable that's been shattered and put back together with pieces missing. Priscilla gave her an odd look. You've always had a weird way with words. Anyway, if you're interested in Blackwood Technologies, their headquarters is downtown. They have a foundation that funds environmental research. As they pulled up to Meridian's modest apartment building, Priscilla added, just be careful. Rumor has it he's not entirely stable these days. Grief does strange things to people, especially when they have the resources to indulge their darker impulses. Meridian nodded, but as she climbed the stairs to her apartment, she couldn't shake the image of those empty blue eyes briefly flickering with interest when she spoke about her work. In that momentary spark, she'd glimpsed something the rumors hadn't mentioned. Not insanity, not darkness, longing. You did what? Priscilla nearly choked on her coffee, spraying droplets across the laboratory counter. You can't just show up at Blackwood Technologies unannounced. Meridian continued packing sample vials into her leather satchel. Why not? Their foundation funds botanical research. I have botanical research. Because normal people schedule appointments through proper channels. They don't just. Priscilla waved her hands frantically. Waltz into corporate headquarters with plant samples and a PowerPoint. My appointment is at 11. Meridian smiled, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. I called his assistant yesterday, and they agreed. Priscilla's eyes widened behind her glasses. Just like that. Meridian didn't mention how she'd invoked Thaddeus's comment about things worth saving to convince the skeptical assistant, or how she'd spent half the night preparing slides and organizing her research into a compelling presentation. Her heart had raced dangerously several times, forcing her to pause and control her breathing. Mr. Caldwell said Mr. Blackwood has an unexpected opening in his schedule. I need to hurry if I'm going to make it downtown in time. 30 minutes later, Meridian stood in the gleaming lobby of Blackwood Tower, a 40-story glass and steel structure overlooking Boston Harbor. Unlike most corporate buildings with their sterile aesthetics, living walls of plants covered significant portions of the interior. Solar tubes channeled natural light throughout the space, feeding the greenery and reducing energy consumption. Ms. Winslow, a tall man with an impeccable suit and kind eyes, approached. Wyatt Caldwell. We spoke on the phone. Thank you for arranging this meeting, Mr. Caldwell. I must confess, I was surprised when Mr. Blackwood instructed me to clear his schedule after I mentioned your call. Wyatt escorted her to a private elevator. He rarely takes unscheduled meetings these days. The elevator ascended silently to the top floor. As the doors opened, Meridian stepped into a space that defied corporate convention. The CEO's floor featured an open design with panoramic views and another living wall, this one bearing rare tropical specimens. Natural wood and stone accents softened the modern architecture. Thaddeus Blackwood stood at the windows, his back to the elevator. Unlike at the gala, he wore dark jeans and a simple black sweater rolled up at the sleeves, revealing muscular forearms. Ms. Winslow is here, sir, Wyatt announced. Thaddeus turned, and Meridian was struck again by the emptiness in his eyes, now visible in the harsh light of day. Dark circles beneath them suggested another sleepless night. Thank you, Wyatt. Cancel my lunch with the board. Wyatt hesitated. Sir, Mr. Vandermeer specifically requested, cancel it. The command was soft but absolute. When they were alone, Thaddeus gestured to a seating area. Your call was unexpected. You mentioned a proposal? Meridian nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of her presumption. This man controlled a multi-billion-dollar corporation. What had she been thinking? I'm researching endangered medicinal plants, she began, pulling out her tablet. Traditional knowledge is being lost as ecosystems are destroyed. My project aims to identify, catalog, and preserve these species before it's too late. She launched into her presentation, explaining how indigenous communities had used specific plants for centuries to treat ailments that modern medicine still struggled with. As she spoke, her natural passion overcame her nerves. This species, she pulled a specimen from her satchel, contains compounds that early trials suggest may help regulate cardiac arrhythmias more effectively than current medications, with fewer side effects. Thaddeus leaned forward slightly. And your proposal? I need funding to establish preservation nurseries in 3 key regions: the Amazon, Southeast Asia, and Central Africa. Local communities would maintain the sites, preserving both the plants and the traditional knowledge about their applications. How much? Meridian swallowed hard. $2 million. To her surprise, Thaddeus didn't flinch at the number. He simply asked, for what timeline? 3 years. After that, the nurseries should be self-sustaining through partnerships with ethical pharmaceutical companies. We'd share discoveries with them in exchange for fair compensation to the indigenous communities. Thaddeus stood and walked to his desk, tapping briefly on a keyboard. The Blackwood Foundation typically funds technological innovations, not botanical preservation. Meridian's heart sank. I understand. She began gathering her materials. I didn't say no. He turned back to her. Your presentation was compelling, but I have a counter-proposal. I'm listening. My estate has extensive grounds. Much of it lies in used since. He paused, a shadow crossing his face. I'll fund a pilot project. Create a preservation nursery on my property. Prove your concept works, and I'll consider the full proposal. Meridian blinked in surprise. That's not what I expected. There's one condition. His voice remained emotionless, clinical. You personally oversee the project. No delegating to assistants or contractors. Why? Something flickered behind his eyes, the same spark she'd glimpsed at the gala. Because you care. That's rare. Before she could respond, Wyatt returned with a subtle knock. Sir, your medication. Thaddeus accepted a small pill container without comment, swallowing a tablet dry. The casual gesture resonated with Meridian's own daily ritual. I accept your condition, she said once Wyatt had departed. When do we start? Tomorrow. Wyatt will send you the details. He turned back to the windows, a clear dismissal. Meridian gathered her things, a mixture of elation and uncertainty churning inside her. At the elevator, she paused. Mr. Blackwood? He didn't turn. Yes. May I ask why you're really doing this? For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. My wife loved gardens. The next morning, a sleek black car collected Meridian from her apartment at precisely 8 a.m. The driver, a stoic man named Raymond, delivered her to the Blackwood estate 30 minutes later. In daylight, the Beacon Hill mansion was even more imposing, a massive stone structure surrounded by high walls and mature trees. Wyatt greeted her at the front entrance. Mr. Blackwood is in a virtual board meeting. He asked me to show you the grounds and potential sites for your nursery. The estate sprawled across 3 acres, a rarity in the heart of Boston. Most of it lay untended, with only the areas visible from the house maintaining any semblance of care. The previous owners established formal gardens, Wyatt explained, leading her along overgrown paths. Mrs. Blackwood began renovations to create more natural landscapes, but after the accident, he trailed off. How long have you worked for Mr. Blackwood? Meridian asked, noting how the assistant's eyes softened at the mention of his employer. 12 years. I was his first hire when Blackwood Technologies was still operating out of a garage. Wyatt's voice held genuine affection. He's a good man, Ms. Winslow. Life has been unkind to him. They reached a clearing where remnants of a formal rose garden had been partially removed. Mrs. Blackwood intended this area to become a meadow of native plants. It might suit your purposes. Meridian knelt to examine the soil, her fingers probing the rich earth. It's perfect. South-facing, protected from northeast winds, good drainage. As she stood, a wave of dizziness washed over her. She staggered slightly, pressing a hand to her chest. Are you all right? Wyatt moved quickly to steady her. Just stood up too fast. Meridian fumbled for her pill case. It happens sometimes. Should I call a doctor? No. It's a managed condition. She swallowed her medication. I just need a moment. When she looked up, Thaddeus was watching from the edge of the clearing, his expression unreadable. How long he had been there, she couldn't say. The meeting ended early, he said, approaching them. Have you found a suitable location? Meridian nodded, embarrassed at being caught in a vulnerable moment. This area would be ideal. The soil composition is excellent, and the existing irrigation system can be modified easily. If he noticed her discomfort, he didn't acknowledge it. Instead, he walked to the massive oak tree at the edge of the clearing, similar to the one from the gala. His hand rested briefly on its trunk. This tree stays, he said, his tone leaving no room for discussion. Of course, old growth is valuable to any ecosystem. Meridian approached cautiously, noticing again the disturbed earth near the tree's roots. Is there something special about this oak? Thaddeus withdrew his hand, as if the bark had suddenly burned him. I need to return to work. Wyatt will provide whatever resources you require. As he walked away, Meridian called after him, Mr. Blackwood? He paused, but didn't turn around. Thank you for this opportunity. I won't disappoint you. People usually do, he replied quietly. But I hope you're the exception. Over the next 3 weeks, Meridian divided her time between the Harvard lab and the Blackwood estate. Rare seedlings from her university collection found new homes in the emerging nursery. Specialized growing conditions were created for particularly delicate species. Throughout this time, Thaddeus remained distant, approving expenditures through Wyatt but rarely appearing in the gardens. On the few occasions their paths crossed, their interactions were brief and professional. Yet Meridian often felt his presence at the mansion's windows, watching her work from a distance. One afternoon, as thunderclouds gathered over Boston, Meridian raced to cover delicate new plantings before the storm hit. Rain began falling in heavy sheets just as she secured the last protective tarp. Soaked and breathing heavily from the exertion, she felt the familiar fluttering in her chest, her heart struggling with the sudden strain. She fumbled for her medication, but her wet fingers couldn't grip the pill case. Darkness edged her vision as she sank to her knees in the mud. Through the haze, she became aware of strong arms lifting her. Thaddeus's voice, for once filled with something other than emptiness, called her name. The last thing she saw before consciousness slipped away was his face, the mask of indifference finally cracked by something that looked remarkably like fear. Elliot Vandermeer smoothed his Italian silk tie as he reviewed the quarterly projections on his office monitor. Unlike Thaddeus's minimalist workspace, Elliot's domain was deliberately ostentatious. Modern art worth millions adorned the walls, and a custom desk of endangered rainforest wood dominated the room. "Mr. Blackwood has missed 3 board meetings in a row," his assistant reported, "and he's canceled the strategic planning session again." Elliot's smile didn't reach his eyes. How unfortunate. Draft a memo expressing the board's concerns about his continued absence. When his assistant left, Elliot pulled up the security feed from Thaddeus's estate, a backdoor he'd installed in the system years ago. The camera revealed a young woman kneeling in the soil of what had once been Caroline's garden. Thaddeus stood nearby, watching her with an expression Elliot hadn't seen in years. "Interest. Ms. Winslow seems to have made quite an impression," Elliot murmured, freezing the frame. "How interesting." He keyed a private number on his phone. "Jenkins, I need information on a Meridian Winslow. Works at Harvard's ethnobotany department. Everything, background, finances, medical history, family. Priority level 1. 3 days later, a secure file arrived. Elliot poured himself a glass of bourbon as he reviewed its contents. Family from Vermont, conservative religious background, graduated top of her class, cardiac arrhythmia diagnosed at 19, brother Jeremiah Winslow, minister in Rutland. His finger paused on a detail. Research focus on compounds that affect heart regulation. Now that's providential. Elliot closed the file and swirled his drink thoughtfully. For 3 years, he'd waited patiently. 3 years since ensuring that the private jet carrying Caroline and Ethan Blackwood would never reach its destination. A tragic accident, or so the investigation had concluded. Only Elliot knew about the maintenance records he'd altered, the technician he'd bribed. Thaddeus's subsequent withdrawal had worked perfectly for Elliot. Without his partner's obsessive oversight, Elliot had slowly positioned allies throughout the company. Soon he would have enough board support to force Thaddeus out entirely. All he needed was one final push, evidence that Thaddeus was mentally unfit to lead. But this girl complicated things. If Thaddeus was emerging from his grief-induced isolation, Elliot's window of opportunity might close. He picked up the phone again. "Jenkins, I need you to find Jeremiah Winslow. I think the good Reverend should know what his sister is getting herself into." In Rutland, Vermont, Reverend Jeremiah Winslow frowned as he read the email that had arrived from an anonymous sender. Attached were photos of his sister working at the Blackwood estate, along with tabloid clippings detailing Thaddeus Blackwood's descent into madness following his family's death. A final image showed Meridian being carried in Blackwood's arms during the recent thunderstorm, her body limp, his face intense. The accompanying message was simple. "Your sister has fallen under the influence of a dangerous, unstable man. She needs your help." Jeremiah's austere face hardened as he reached for his phone. "Father, it's about Meridian. I think she's in trouble." Meanwhile, at Massachusetts General Hospital, Meridian opened her eyes to find Thaddeus sitting beside her bed, his features rigid with concern. "The doctors say it was a minor cardiac event," he said before she could speak. "Why didn't you disclose your condition?" Meridian straightened the hospital blanket. "It's managed with medication. I don't define myself by it. You collapsed in a thunderstorm. I forgot my pills when the rain started. She met his gaze directly, just like you sometimes forget yours. Thaddeus stiffened. That's different. Is it? We all have our broken parts, Mr. Blackwood. For a moment, something vulnerable flickered across his face. Then the shutters came down again. The doctors want to keep you overnight for observation. I've arranged for a specialist to see you tomorrow. That's not necessary. It's not negotiable. He stood abruptly. Your project will continue. Wyatt will ensure the plantings are protected until you're cleared to return. As he reached the door, Meridian called out, Why do you care what happens to me? Thaddeus paused, his back to her. I don't know, he admitted quietly. That's what worries me. That evening, Elliot Vandermeer's private line rang. It's Jenkins. Reverend Winslow is en route to Boston. And I found something else you should know. His voice lowered. The Winslow girl's research, it's not just theoretical. Early trials suggest one of her compounds might revolutionize arrhythmia treatment. Elliot's grip tightened on the phone. Estimated market value? Billions, potentially. And Blackwood Technologies' biochemical division would be the perfect development partner, which means Thaddeus would control the patents. Elliot's voice hardened. That's unacceptable. There's more. I've been monitoring their communications. Blackwood has scheduled a formal announcement next week, the formation of a new research partnership, the Blackwood-Winslow Foundation for Botanical Preservation. Elliot ended the call and stared out at the Boston skyline. 3 years of careful planning threatened by a girl with plants and a weak heart. He wouldn't allow it. His computer chimed with an incoming message. The screen displayed a confirmation, transfer of $250,000 to an offshore account. Below it, a simple acknowledgement from someone identified only as handler. Assignment accepted. Will proceed as discussed. Elliot closed the message and poured another bourbon. By the time Meridian Winslow returned to the Blackwood estate, everything would be in motion. Soon, Thaddeus would face a choice, his company or the girl, and Elliot knew exactly which one he would choose. Meridian's hands trembled as she dug in the soil near the ancient oak. 3 days after her release from the hospital, she had returned to the Blackwood estate, against her doctor's advice and Priscilla's vehement objections. Something about Thaddeus's reaction to this tree nagged at her mind. The way he touched it, the disturbed earth, the pain in his eyes whenever he came near it. The specialist Thaddeus had arranged, a world-renowned cardiologist, had adjusted her medication and warned her to avoid strenuous activity. But some mysteries couldn't wait for medical clearance. Her trowel struck something solid. Brushing away dirt, she revealed a metal box, roughly the size of a hardcover book, weather-resistant and locked. Not deeply buried, as if someone had wanted it hidden but findable. I wondered if you'd discover it eventually. Meridian jumped, nearly toppling backward. Thaddeus stood a few feet away, hands in the pockets of his jeans. For once, he wasn't wearing his customary black, but a faded blue sweater that softened his appearance. I'm sorry, she stammered. I wasn't trying to. Yes, you were. His voice held no accusation, only weariness. You're curious by nature. It's why you're good at what you do. He knelt beside her and extended his hand. After a moment's hesitation, she placed the box in his palm. I buried this 3 years ago, the day of their funeral. His fingers traced the metal edges. I swore I'd never look at these things again. What are they? Instead of answering, he stood and walked toward the house. After a moment, she followed. In Thaddeus's study, a room she'd never entered before, he placed the box on his desk and retrieved a key from a hidden compartment in a bookshelf. Unlocking the box revealed its contents: photographs, a small toy airplane, a woman's silver bracelet, and another key. My wife, Caroline. He handed Meridian a photo of a laughing woman with wild blonde hair, embracing a young boy. And my son, Ethan. They're beautiful. Meridian's heart ached at the raw love evident in the captured moment. The official investigation concluded that mechanical failure caused the crash. Thaddeus's voice turned clinical, detached. A faulty component in the navigation system. He took the second key from the box and walked to a painting on the wall, an abstract rendering of ocean waves. Behind it was a safe. The key unlocked it, but I found inconsistencies. He removed a file folder from the safe. Maintenance records that didn't match. A technician who quit abruptly and disappeared to South America. And this. He handed her a document, a technical analysis of the navigation system. The component didn't fail. It was tampered with. His voice remained eerily calm. Someone sabotaged their plane, Meridian. She stared at him, the implications sinking in. Have you gone to the authorities? With what? Circumstantial evidence and the theories of a grieving husband? They'd dismiss it as denial, paranoia. He closed the file. But I know who did it. Who? Elliot Vandermeer. Thaddeus's expression hardened. My partner. My friend. The man who's been systematically positioning himself to take control of my company while I've been distracted. Meridian struggled to process this revelation. Why would he? Money. Power. Our solar storage technology was my creation. Elliot wanted to sell it to the highest bidder. I refused. We argued about it the week before the crash. He ran a hand through his hair. I never imagined he would. His voice broke finally, the clinical detachment crumbling. Meridian instinctively reached for his hand. I've spent 3 years gathering evidence, he continued after composing himself. But I need more to prove it. That's why you've been letting him think you're falling apart. You're playing for time. Thaddeus looked at her with newfound respect. You see more than most. A moment of silence stretched between them, charged with unspoken understanding. Then Meridian took a deep breath. I should tell you something too. She pressed a hand to her chest, the gesture he'd noticed before. My heart condition isn't just an inconvenience. It's degenerative. Thaddeus went still. Meaning? The medications control the symptoms, but the underlying condition is progressive. Eventually, they'll stop working effectively. She forced herself to maintain eye contact. My doctors give me perhaps 15 years, maybe 20 with luck and medical advances. That's why you're so driven with your research. She nodded. The plant compound I'm studying might help. Not just me, but others like me. But I need to work quickly. Why are you telling me this now? Because secrets destroy people from the inside out. She gestured to the box, the photos. You've been alone with yours for too long. Something shifted in Thaddeus's eyes, the emptiness receding, replaced by an emotion she couldn't quite name. He took a step toward her. The study door burst open. Wyatt stood there, uncharacteristically flustered. Sir, there's a situation. Reverend Jeremiah Winslow is at the gate, demanding to see his sister. He's threatening to call the police. Jeremiah? Meridian's face drained of color. What's he doing in Boston? He's saying you're being held against your will by. Wyatt hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. By me. Thaddeus finished flatly. An unstable, dangerous man corrupting his innocent sister. How would he even think that? Meridian asked. Thaddeus's expression darkened. Elliot. He's making his move. We should let him in, Meridian decided. I'll talk to him. As they walked to the foyer, Thaddeus placed a hand on her arm. Meridian, there's something else you should know. The foundation announcement next week. Can wait, she said gently. Let me handle my brother first. When Wyatt showed Jeremiah in, Meridian barely recognized him. Her normally composed older brother looked harried, his face flushed with righteous indignation. When he spotted Thaddeus, his expression hardened. Mary, pack your things. You're coming home with me. Jeremiah's voice carried the same authoritative tone their father had used. I'm not going anywhere, Ja. I have work to do here. This man is dangerous. Jeremiah thrust a folder toward her. Look at these reports. His erratic behavior, his isolation. Father and I agree. You involved father? Meridian interrupted, anger flaring. I'm 25 years old, Jeremiah. Neither of you has any say in my life or my work. Your work? Jeremiah's voice turned scornful. Or is he just using you to access your research? A valuable compound that could be worth billions. Meridian's startled gaze flew to Thaddeus, whose expression had returned to its familiar mask of emptiness. Where did you hear that? She demanded. A concerned investor at Blackwood Technologies contacted me. Jeremiah glared at Thaddeus. He showed me the company's plans to patent your discovery without proper credit or compensation. The accusation hung in the air, a poisonous cloud that seemed to expand with each passing second. In that moment, Meridian realized the masterstroke of Elliot's plan. He hadn't just brought her brother to Boston. He'd driven a perfect wedge between her and Thaddeus. And from the shuttered look returning to Thaddeus's eyes, it was working exactly as intended. Is it true? Meridian's voice barely rose above a whisper. Thaddeus met her gaze, his expression now completely unreadable. I think you should go with your brother. That's not an answer. She took a step toward him. Are you using me to access my research? Ms. Winslow. His voice had turned formal, distant, addressing her as he might a business acquaintance rather than someone who had just shared their deepest secret with him. Your brother's concerns aren't entirely unfounded. Your position here is unconventional. Jeremiah moved to Meridian's side, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. See? Even he admits it. Thaddeus continued as if Jeremiah hadn't spoken. The Blackwood Foundation will honor our agreement. Your project will receive the promised funding. But perhaps it's best if you oversee it from Harvard rather than continuing here. The clinical dismissal stung more than outright anger would have. So everything. The nursery, the foundation announcement, it was all to gain access to my compound research. Something flashed in Thaddeus's eyes. Pain, perhaps, or frustration. But it vanished so quickly Meridian wondered if she'd imagined it. Business is business, Ms. Winslow. Surely you didn't think it was personal. The words hit her like physical blows. Memories flashed through her mind. His gentle concern when she'd collapsed, the vulnerability when he'd shared his family's photos, the way his eyes had softened when she told him about her condition. Actually, I did. Her voice trembled despite her effort to control it. I thought I'd seen the real man behind the mask. I was wrong. Thaddeus turned away, his shoulders rigid. Wyatt will arrange for your equipment to be transferred to Harvard. You'll receive the first installment of funding next week. Jeremiah tightened his grip on her shoulder. We're leaving, Mary. Now, as her brother guided her toward the door, Meridian glanced back. Thaddeus stood motionless, staring at the metal box and its scattered contents, the last remnants of his family, exposed on his desk like an open wound. Wait, she said, pulling away from Jeremiah. She approached Thaddeus one last time. Whatever game you're playing, it's not worth the cost. Trust me on that. Some things, once broken, can't be fixed. Without waiting for a response, she walked out, her heart, both literally and figuratively, aching in her chest. Later that evening, in her small apartment, Meridian sat surrounded by boxes. Jeremiah paced the limited floor space, his righteous indignation having given way to brotherly concern. You can't stay in Boston, he insisted. Not after this. Come home to Vermont. The University Hospital in Burlington has a research department. You could continue your work there. I'm not running away. Meridian absently sorted through a box of research notes, unable to focus on any of them. My life is here now. That man was manipulating you. Maybe. Or maybe there's more to the story. She looked up at her brother. How exactly did this investor contact you? What was his name? Jeremiah hesitated. He didn't give his name. Just said he was concerned about your welfare. And you didn't find that suspicious? Some anonymous person sends you information about me and Blackwood Technologies, and you immediately rush to Boston without even calling me first. The evidence was compelling, Mary. Photos of you collapsed in his arms. Reports about his mental state after his family died. Photos. Meridian frowned. How would anyone have photos of that? It happened during a thunderstorm in his private garden. A knock at the door interrupted them. Priscilla entered without waiting for an answer, carrying 2 bottles of wine and a determined expression. Okay, I'm here for the full story. She set the bottles down and eyed Jeremiah with undisguised suspicion. You must be the brother. After awkward introductions, Meridian recounted the day's events while Priscilla opened the wine. So let me get this straight, Priscilla said when she finished. Your brother shows up with mysterious evidence from an anonymous source, accuses Blackwood of using you for your research, and instead of denying it, he just lets you leave? That's the simplified version, yes. And you don't find that weird? The man who arranged for the top cardiologist in the country to treat you? Who personally carried you through a thunderstorm? Who's been watching you from his window like some gothic romance hero for weeks? What are you suggesting? Jeremiah interjected. Priscilla ignored him, focusing on Meridian. Think about it. If he wanted your research, why not just buy it? He's a billionaire. Why the elaborate garden project? Why the personal involvement? And most importantly, why would he let you walk away the moment you're accused? Meridian's mind raced, trying to make sense of the contradictions. He's playing some kind of game. Or he's protecting you. Priscilla countered. From what, I don't know. But there's definitely more happening than a research grab. Her phone chimed with a text message. Meridian glanced at it, then froze. What is it? Jeremiah asked. It's from Dr. Abernathy at the lab. Someone accessed my research files tonight. Everything. The compound analysis, the preliminary trials, all of it has been copied. Her hands began to shake, and it wasn't Thaddeus. How do you know? Priscilla asked. Because it happened an hour ago, while we've been sitting here. Meridian looked up, fear evident in her eyes. The IP address traces back to Vandermeer Holdings. Jeremiah frowned. Who? Elliot Vandermeer. Thaddeus's business partner. Meridian stood abruptly. The man Thaddeus believes killed his family. She grabbed her coat, ignoring her brother's protests. Where are you going? Priscilla asked, already reaching for her own jacket. Back to the Blackwood estate. I need to know the truth. I'm coming with you, Priscilla insisted. And so am I, Jeremiah added grimly. I don't trust any of this. But when they arrived at the estate 30 minutes later, they found the gates locked and the security system unresponsive. No lights shone from the mansion windows. Meridian's repeated calls to Thaddeus went straight to voicemail. When she finally reached Wyatt, his voice was tense, controlled. Ms. Winslow, I can't speak freely at the moment. Mr. Blackwood is unavailable. Wyatt, my research has been stolen. I need to. I'm aware of the situation, he interrupted. Mr. Blackwood left instructions for you. What instructions? Stay away from the estate. Stay away from Blackwood Technologies. He'll handle this. Handle what exactly? Meridian demanded. There was a long pause before Wyatt replied. He's gone to confront Mr. Vandermeer. Alone. The line went dead, leaving Meridian staring at her phone in dawning horror. In her mind's eye, she saw the metal box from beneath the oak tree, the evidence Thaddeus had gathered, the cold determination in his eyes when he spoke of the man who had taken everything from him. We need to get to Blackwood Technologies, she said urgently. Now. The Blackwood Technologies headquarters stood dark against the night sky, most windows unlit at this late hour. Only the executive floor showed signs of life, soft light emanating from the corner office Meridian recognized as Thaddeus's. We can't just walk in there, Jeremiah insisted as Priscilla parked across the street. There's security. I still have my access badge, Meridian replied, pulling the credential from her purse. Thaddeus had given it to her weeks ago, allowing her to come and go freely when collecting supplies for the nursery. This is insane, her brother muttered. We should call the police. And tell them what? That two businessmen are having a disagreement? That my research, which isn't technically patented, was accessed? Meridian shook her head. We need proof before involving authorities. The night guard recognized her, nodding as the trio entered the lobby. The executive elevator, however, required a security code. Meridian's badge wouldn't suffice. Now what? Priscilla whispered. Meridian led them to the service elevator instead. Wyatt showed me this once. It goes to all floors. As they ascended, Meridian's heart raced, not from exertion this time, but from fear of what they might find. The betrayal she'd felt earlier had given way to a creeping dread. Thaddeus wasn't just confronting a business rival. He was facing the man he believed had murdered his family. The service elevator opened to a darkened hallway. Voices drifted from Thaddeus's office, tense, angry, though the words were indistinct. Motioning for the others to stay back, Meridian crept forward. Through the partially open door, she saw Thaddeus standing rigidly behind his desk, facing Elliot Vandermeer. The contrast between them was striking. Thaddeus disheveled in the same clothes he'd worn earlier, Elliot impeccable in an expensive suit despite the late hour. You've lost your mind, Elliot was saying, his voice smooth, controlled. These accusations are the ravings of a man consumed by grief. The board will have no choice but to remove you when they hear this. The board won't hear anything, Thaddeus replied. This stays between us. You, me, and the truth about Flight 1382. Elliot laughed, a cold sound devoid of humor. What truth? A faulty component caused the crash. The investigation was thorough. The investigation missed the maintenance records you altered, the technician you paid off. But I didn't. Thaddeus tossed a file folder onto the desk. It's all here, Elliot. Every piece of evidence I've gathered over 3 years. Evidence. Elliot's composure slipped momentarily. You have theories, circumstantial connections. Nothing that would stand up in court. Maybe not, but it would raise enough questions to trigger a new investigation. Thaddeus's voice hardened. And we both know what they'd find this time. Elliot moved to the bar cart in the corner, pouring himself a drink with steady hands. What do you want, Thaddeus? Money? My resignation. I want you to admit it. I want to hear you say why my wife and son had to die. For a long moment, Elliot said nothing, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Then he smiled, a predator's smile. Caroline was collateral damage, he said finally. The target was always you, Thaddeus. You were supposed to be on that plane. Meridian stifled a gasp as Thaddeus staggered slightly, gripping the edge of his desk. You changed your plans at the last minute. Elliot continued, almost conversational now. Some breakthrough with the solar cells. Caroline and Ethan went ahead without you. He shrugged. An unfortunate complication. All for control of the company? Thaddeus's voice was hollow. Not just the company, the technology. Do you have any idea what military applications your storage cells have? The Pentagon offered $2 billion for exclusive rights. You turned them down for your environmental crusade. So you killed 27 people. I created an opportunity. Elliot's mask had fully slipped now, revealing the calculating coldness beneath. And I'll create another. Tonight, in fact. He set down his glass and reached into his jacket. Your mental state has deteriorated, Thaddeus. Overcome by paranoid delusions, you attacked me during a late-night confrontation. Fortunately, I was able to defend myself. The glint of a pistol appeared in Elliot's hand. Tragic, really. Another loss for Blackwood Technologies. Meridian acted without thinking. Pushing the door open, she burst into the office. Stop. Both men turned in shock. Elliot recovered first, his smile returning as he kept the gun trained on Thaddeus. Ms. Winslow. How convenient. I'd hoped to deal with you separately, but since you're here. The research you stole, she said, stepping forward despite Thaddeus's warning glance. It's incomplete. Useless without the final catalyzing agent. Elliot's eyes narrowed. Explain. The compound requires a stabilizer that isn't documented in the files. Without it, the formula is worthless, potentially dangerous. Then you'll provide the missing component, Elliot replied smoothly. Your brother helped me reach you once. He can be persuasive again. Jeremiah? What does he have to do with this? Your brother was an unwitting pawn, Elliot explained, gesturing with the gun. But pawns have their uses. Especially righteous, protective ones so easily manipulated with anonymous evidence about the dangerous man corrupting his sister. Understanding dawned on Meridian's face. You orchestrated everything. The photos, the information about my research. I prefer to think of it as strategic management, Elliot interrupted. Now, about that stabilizing agent. There isn't one, Meridian said flatly. I lied to get in here. The research is complete as stolen. I just needed you to admit your involvement on record. She pulled her phone from her pocket, the voice memo app clearly displaying its recording status. Elliot's expression contorted with rage. He swung the gun toward her. You stupid. Two things happened simultaneously. Thaddeus lunged across the desk toward Elliot, and the office door burst open as Jeremiah and Priscilla rushed in. The gun discharged with a deafening crack. Meridian felt herself being shoved aside, falling hard against a bookcase. When her vision cleared, Thaddeus was on the floor, a spreading crimson stain on his shirt. Elliot stood over him, gun now pointed at Meridian and the others. Nobody moves, Elliot commanded, his composure shattered. Phone's on the desk. Now, as Priscilla and Jeremiah complied, Meridian crawled toward Thaddeus, ignoring Elliot's warning. Blood seeped through Thaddeus's fingers as he pressed his hand against his shoulder. I'm okay, he whispered as she reached him. Flesh wound. Elliot backed toward the private elevator, gun still trained on the group. This is how it's going to work. I'm leaving. Anyone tries to follow, I start shooting to kill. You won't get away with this, Jeremiah said, his earlier righteousness now directed at Elliot. We all heard your confession. A confession with no witnesses is just a conversation, Elliot replied. And dead people don't testify. His finger tightened on the trigger just as the office plunged into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on seconds later, revealing Wyatt standing by the door, his hand on the master breaker switch. In the momentary confusion, Thaddeus had somehow managed to get to his feet. He tackled Elliot as the elevator doors opened, both men disappearing inside as the doors closed again. No, Meridian scrambled forward, but it was too late. The elevator indicator showed it descending rapidly to the parking garage. Wyatt was already on the phone. Security locked down the garage level. Blackwood and Vandermeer are in elevator 1. Vandermeer is armed. He hung up and turned to Meridian. Are you hurt? No, but Thaddeus is shot. The elevator. I know a faster way. Service stairs. Wyatt moved to a hidden door disguised as part of the wall paneling. It leads directly to the garage. Meridian followed without hesitation, leaving Priscilla to call 911 and Jeremiah staring open-mouthed at the blood on the office floor. As they raced down the stairs, Meridian's phone clutched tightly in her hand. She prayed they weren't already too late. 6 months later, the Blackwood Estate gardens bloomed with new life. What had once been neglected grounds now flourished with rare medicinal plants from 3 continents, each carefully labeled and tended. A state-of-the-art greenhouse gleamed in the morning sunlight, housing the most delicate specimens. Meridian moved among the plants, clipboard in hand, checking growth measurements. Despite the early hour, she'd already taken her medication, a new formula that regulated her heart rhythm more effectively than anything previously available. The old oak tree still stood majestically at the garden's edge, but the soil around it was no longer disturbed. In its place, a simple memorial stone bore 2 names, Caroline and Ethan Blackwood. Fresh flowers, blue hydrangeas, Caroline's favorite, adorned the base of the tree. The Amazonian specimens are responding well to the nutrient adjustments, Thaddeus said, approaching from the greenhouse. The past months had changed him. The perpetual shadows beneath his eyes had lightened, and while grief still marked his features, it no longer consumed him. The soil composition is finally balanced, Meridian replied. The Pernambuco seedlings have shown 2 centimeters of growth in just a week. They worked in companionable silence for a while, the routine familiar after months of collaboration. The events following that night at Blackwood Technologies had transformed both their lives. Elliot Vandermeer was now awaiting trial for multiple charges: corporate espionage, attempted murder, and, after a reopened investigation with Meridian's recorded confession as key evidence, 27 counts of negligent homicide for the plane crash. His carefully constructed facade had crumbled when confronted by police in the parking garage that night. With Thaddeus bleeding from the gunshot wound, Elliot had panicked and fired again, missing Thaddeus but hitting a concrete pillar. The ricochet had grazed Elliot's own leg, causing him to fall. By the time Meridian and Wyatt arrived via the service stairs, security guards had already subdued him. The investigation that followed revealed the full extent of Elliot's schemes. Not only had he orchestrated the plane's sabotage, but he'd been systematically undermining Thaddeus within the company, manipulating board members, and fabricating concerns about his mental stability. The final piece had been Meridian's research, potentially worth billions if properly developed and patented. The board meeting went well yesterday, Thaddeus said as they moved to a shaded bench for a brief rest. The Blackwood Winslow Foundation is officially funded for the next decade. 3 preservation nurseries, just as you originally proposed. Meridian smiled. Amazon, Southeast Asia, and Central Africa? Exactly as planned. Construction begins next month. He handed her a tablet displaying architectural renderings. I've added research facilities to each location. Local scientists working alongside indigenous experts. The foundation had become their shared passion, a way to honor what had been lost while creating something new. Thaddeus had returned to active leadership of Blackwood Technologies, focusing the company's resources on sustainable development and medical research. Meridian divided her time between the Harvard lab and the estate gardens, developing her cardiac compound while overseeing the preservation project. Their professional partnership had flourished, but something deeper had grown alongside it. Neither had rushed to define the gradual shift from colleagues to friends to something more. Both carried wounds that needed time to heal. Thaddeus's grief, Meridian's uncertainty about her future. My brother called again, Meridian said, returning the tablet. He's still apologizing. Thaddeus's expression softened. He was trying to protect you. By jumping to conclusions and refusing to listen? She shook her head. Jeremiah's always been like that, seeing the world in absolutes. But at least now he's questioning his assumptions. After the confrontation with Elliot, Jeremiah had been forced to reckon with how easily he'd been manipulated. His shame at being used as a pawn in Elliot's game had eventually given way to genuine remorse. Now back in Vermont, he called regularly, his initial disapproval of Meridian's relationship with Thaddeus gradually evolving into cautious acceptance. The dedication ceremony is at 2. Thaddeus reminded her, glancing at his watch. The press will start arriving at noon. Today marked the official unveiling of the foundation, with representatives from environmental organizations, medical research institutions, and indigenous rights groups in attendance. What had begun as a small preservation project had expanded into something neither of them had initially imagined. "I should change," Meridian said, brushing soil from her gardening clothes. "Priscilla is bringing my dress at 11. As she started toward the house, Thaddeus caught her hand. "Wait, there's something I want to show you first." He led her to a secluded corner of the garden they'd seldom visited, a walled enclosure that had once been Caroline's private retreat. For months, he had kept it locked, unwilling to disturb the last space his wife had designed. Now he produced a key. "I've been working on this when you're at the lab. Well, you'll see." The gate swung open to reveal a transformed space. What had once been a traditional rose garden had been reimagined as a healing garden, with carefully arranged medicinal plants from around the world. In the center stood a striking sculpture, a delicate bronze tree, its branches supporting glass leaves that caught and refracted the sunlight. "It's beautiful," Meridian whispered, stepping into the space. "Each leaf represents a species we've preserved," Thaddeus explained. "As we save more, we'll add to it." She touched one of the glass leaves gently. This was Caroline's garden. She would have wanted it to live again, he said quietly, to heal rather than remain a shrine to loss. The unspoken parallels hung in the air between them. Meridian turned to face him, recognizing the vulnerability in his eyes, the same expression he'd worn when first showing her the metal box buried under the oak. "Thaddeus, I've been thinking about time," he interrupted softly. "How we measure it, how we use it." She nodded, her hand instinctively moving to her heart. "I'm familiar with the concept. When I lost Caroline and Ethan, time became my enemy. Endless, meaningless hours to endure." He took both her hands in his. "But since you came into my life, I've started to see time differently. Not as something to endure, but as something precious. Limited." Meridian's pulse quickened. "Thaddeus, my condition, I know. 15 years, maybe 20. His grip tightened slightly. "But that's not guaranteed for any of us. The only certainty is now." From his pocket, he withdrew a small box. Not metal like the one buried beneath the oak, but velvet-covered. "I'm not asking for forever," he said, opening it to reveal a ring with a simple emerald surrounded by smaller stones. "I'm asking for today, and tomorrow, and however many days we're given. I'm asking if you'll share them with me." Tears welled in Meridian's eyes. "You know there are no guarantees with my heart. The new medication helps, but eventually, I've lived through loss, Meridian. The worst has already happened to me. What I couldn't survive is refusing love because I'm afraid of losing it again." He took a deep breath. "I'd rather have a short time in the light than an eternity in darkness." She looked from the ring to his face, seeing not the empty eyes that had first struck her at the gala, but eyes filled with hope, fear, and love. "Yes," she whispered, her own heart, damaged but still beating, filling with certainty. "Yes to today, yes to whatever comes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, the morning sunlight caught the emerald, casting green reflections across their intertwined hands, the same shade as the new growth in their gardens of possibility. "We should tell everyone at the ceremony," Meridian suggested as they walked back toward the house, hand in hand. Thaddeus smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "I think Wyatt already knows." He helped design the ring. As they reached the ancient oak, they paused briefly before the memorial stone. Meridian watched as Thaddeus gently touched the names engraved there, not in farewell this time, but in acknowledgement of a grief that would always be part of him, yet no longer defined him. The past would always be there, buried like the metal box beneath the oak. But above ground, in the sunlight, new life had taken root and begun to flourish against all odds, fragile, precious, and determined to grow.